constantly evolving room. We're going to be updating some of the paint. We're going to be changing out some of the way that the sound works. Hopefully, at some point, some of the video as well. Speaking of, after this meeting today, there is a board meeting. If you'd like to stick around, see how things are being done, make suggestions, especially if you're a dues paid member, we'd love to hear your input because we do this for you. We serve you as a community. Speaking of, we have a ratification that needs to occur this morning. A ratification is essentially a board vote that needs to be ratified by dues paid members. So dues paid members, please raise your hands. Mike, would you assert that we have at least our 10% of membership? 10% is 29. People, yes, that looks to be definitely. Okay, so the reason I'm asking this is because we need to ratify the appointment of Rada Rosenberg. Rada, there you go. Rada Rosenberg is going to be doing co-chair for service and participation. This board position is the outward-facing stuff that a lot of the work that we're doing for the community around us. A number of the things that we're going to be trying to do this year is another school supplies drive. We're going to be contacting the elementary and high schools that are nearby, asking the teachers and administrators what supplies do the teachers need, and seeing if we can do a supplies drive for them for the upcoming 2025-2026 school year. So, just a number of different projects that Rada will be assisting Michelle with. I don't see Michelle with us this morning, but that's okay. She's in another. Oh, that's right. She's at another event, which is a run, which is helping. It's called Peace Builders. Phoenix Peace Builders. So these are the types of programs that we're trying to get going. So that one, we are in community with each other and in solidarity with the other organizations that are humanist aligned. So, with regard to the vote, the board has appointed Rada as co-chair for Service and Participation Director. So therefore, the motion is for Rada Rosenberg to be co-chair, Service and Participation Director for the 2025 year. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So Rada is now on the board. Welcome, Rada. So, as far as I know, we do not have a Humanist Minute, unless you would like to do that as well.
Let me urge everyone to take a moment when they get a chance to look at the
Take a look at our 10 commitments of humanism.
Take a look at them. Global awareness, responsibility, empathy, critical thinking, ethical development, peace and social justice, service and participation, altruism, humility, environmentalism, global awareness. That's a lot, and that's what we stand for.
All right. So, again, like I said, we do have a board meeting coming up. We've got a number of things that we need to take care of, largely because, as you know, we're all going through some challenging times right now. This community center, like I said, is all volunteer-led, and we essentially need your input, but we also need you to come visit our treasurer over here and maybe drop a couple of bucks in his plate as well, to help keep the community center up and running, keep us the lights on, those types of things, and some of the other, like for instance, just last week, the shed out here that stores many of our tools, many of our supplies, that roof was just replaced so that structure won't experience any water damage from the rare rains that we do have. But that was not a cheap at all repair. So those types of things are ongoing expenses that we experience from time to time. As you know, we put in the high efficiency heat pumps that help keep us cool or warm, mostly cool. So, but these types of expenses we need your assistance with. Even if it's $5, but I'd like for someone who has got some deep pockets to maybe put $500,000 in there. So who knows? Anyway, that being said, oh yes, you can also donate on our website. So, for those of you who are watching online, we are going. I'm not sure. Are we streaming today? We are streaming today live on YouTube. So, for those of you who are just checking us out for the first time, if you're in here in the room for the first time, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. Watch videos. We need your input on not only what we're doing here, but our speakers. We have a suggested speakers page on our website, so check that out as well. Lots of stuff going on. At that, I'm going to shut up because I could talk for the next hour if I wanted to, and allow our wonderful secretary, Mike Shelton, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Alex. It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Senator Lauren Kuby. It's my pleasure because she is a friend, she is a neighbor, and she's my senator in the state legislature. In fact, she represents not just Tempe, but this section of Mesa, also southern Scottsdale. It's quite a district. Lauren, I'm impressed to realize she has an entry in Wikipedia. So I'm going to draw some of this information from Wikipedia. She's originally from Boston, but studied at the University of Chicago as an undergraduate, graduated in 1980 with honors. Now, I can assure you that's quite impressive because my wife and I both went to the University of Chicago. She also is an undergraduate and knows it's tough. It's tough to get in, and it's a very intellectual school, and that is probably the reason why she's today a humanist, because in the University of Chicago, you study the Greek philosophers, and you learn about humanism. Then she moved here and had eventually earned a master's at Arizona State University, is married to a professor of geography at ASU, and has lived here 30 more plus years, working then for the university and the School of Sustainability and Innovation, doing community outreach and engaging that school with the city and the community. And in fact, she ran the Stardust program for homes, affordable homes in the family. See, I should have looked this up. So this is a lady who has been engaged with this community for decades, and then furthermore decided to run for the city council and was elected in 2014 and then re-elected in 2018. Now that's a thankless job because you got to sit through lots of long meetings, but I'll tell you, she had the background and experience of community engagement, the connections to the ASU. She did a great, absolutely great job. So upon completing 2 terms, what does she do? She decides to run for another job for the Corporation Commission and came damn close to winning a seat, like winning over 1 million votes. If she just won another couple thousand, she would have gained a seat with the Corporation Commission. It's such a shame she didn't, because she would have been such the right candidate for that. Not getting discouraged in that, then she ran for the SRP board and came damn close to getting on that one too. Not discouraged with that. Oh, that's the problem with SRP. SRP voting system, she won the popular vote, but the votes are weighted. And if you own only 1/4 of property in SRP, you only get 1/4 of a vote. So the farmers get a lot of votes on SRP boards. And then, not being discouraged about that, she ran for the state senate last year and won. She was selected by the Arizona Democrats as the candidate. She won the vote, and this is her first year in the state senate. So it should be very interesting to hear the impressions of still sort of a newcomer to what it's like down there in City Hall. So please help me welcome Lauren Kuby, our state senator.
Thank
representing
you.
us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll put this down for now. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. It's great to see so many old friends and new friends here. I was last here when I was running for the SRP board with Randy Miller, who's an amazing man. It feels like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. That's what it feels like serving. Because you're focused on one thing at the legislature and you're ripped out of it and focused on the next. And so many emergencies, so many crises, so many problems that we're not really addressing. We're just in this really heavy, politically partisan role. And my job as a legislator, sadly, is to kill bills. I am a Democrat, and Democrats generally do not have bills heard in the legislature. Randy, I didn't even know you were there. Hello, there's Randy Miller, everybody. Sorry. Generally, when you're a Democrat, you don't have bills heard unless it's an inconsequential bill and you're trading something for it, but it's pretty dispiriting because I introduced, I think, 31 bills and one gained some traction and one's being worked on, but it can be a pretty dispiriting place. But as you know, nationally and statewide and locally, we're in the fight. So I feel very much like I'm in the fight and I have a voice and I'm elevating the voices of my district, which includes all of Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian community, and then half of Tempe, half of Scottsdale, parts of Mesa, parts of Phoenix. So it's very geographically broad, but very progressive in its outlook. So here we have the good, the bad, and the ugly of the legislative session so far. We're still there. We still haven't adjourned completely. So I think one of the goods this year have been the protests. How many of you have been to a protest since January? Yeah, I expect a lot of you. Yes, and this is one that we had on May Day, where we had labor unions and teachers and Medicare recipients and the immigrant community and students. So we had just such a wide swath of people coming to protest, 4,000 to 5,000 strong on May Day, on a Thursday morning. Not so easy to get people out on a Thursday morning, but we did. Another good. Hold on, I thought maybe I was missing one. Okay, another good is Chris Mays. I think she's been a part of 15 lawsuits with other attorneys general. She meets every day with 22 attorneys general on a Zoom call to decide their next action. And someone mentioned to her, like, well, how did you were so prepared with a birthright citizenship lawsuit. How did you do that so quickly? It's like, we had Project 2025. We knew it was coming. So we're ready for a lot of these, sadly, sad but true. So Chris, to me, she is the person I'm inspired by in politics today. She's the real deal. I so admire her grit, her determination, and her willingness to just represent the people of Arizona at every opportunity. This is an event we had, Stop Bills for Billionaires, down at the Capitol. And you always have to find your sense of joy and amusement. With me, it's like using my dogs as political props. So we have my grand dog dressed up in a tuxedo, and we wanted to bring attention to the terrible bills in the legislature this year that have advantaged billionaires at the expense of taxpayers. And then, how many of you have been to the Tesla takedown on University? That's an amazing and growing event, and Nancy Tapuzzi has been organizing that, and she's a wonder. She's been getting so many people there, and we had the May Day celebration. She brought, I think, 1,000 people, which she was responsible for bringing to that event. And then, let's talk about some other goods. This was, and maybe you guys could go into this a little more. We have our friends from Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. But did you hear about the whole DDD controversy this year? We had a shortfall of $122 million. Now, in the to pay for a developmentally disabled community, parents has paid caregivers program. It came about in the Ducey administration during COVID as a response to a workforce shortage. These families are dealing with immense issues with their health of their children, severe autism, cystic fibrosis. I mean, so many different compounding medical issues as well. And they have hours that are assessed to them that they can use, but the caregivers are not there. They weren't there before COVID. They certainly weren't there during COVID. So a program began called Parents as Paid Caregivers, where they get paid to take care of their children, so their children can remain in the community, remain in their home, and not be institutionalized. And they have to be trained. It's not just like taking care of your kids the way you usually do. These are complex cases in many cases. So there was a $122 million shortfall that had to be met by May 1st, or that we'd be out of funding for May, June, and July for the last quarter. And the Republicans, not to get political here, but they held it up. They used it as a political football. And the Ducey administration had fulfilled funding gaps all the time without batting an eye. And so these families came every day down to the Capitol. We told their stories when we introduced our guests in the gallery. There were amazing people, and there's Brandy Kuhn, who's a parent advocate, and Nancy Gutierrez on the far right, and Representative Willoughby, who came together to bring this legislation finally forward. And this young woman, she's 12 years old, I believe. Her name is Grace Paley, and she reached out to to Representative Gutierrez and Representative Willoughby and said, you guys need to get together and do this and work together. And that's eventually, I'm skipping a lot of steps, but eventually we got that funding within, a week before the deadline. But it was amazing to see people come down at the Capitol, people who were not necessarily political, and if they were political, they were Republicans. And one parent said to me, from what I've seen, she said she became a liberal because of David Livingston, the chair of the Republican Appropriations Committee, because of his harshness and his toxicity when talking about this issue, and the incredible needs that these families have, and the insensitivity of Livingston in particular. So these are two amazing women, one young, one a parent, who really brought change and really enabled us to get something good done at the legislature. Another good thing, I think, 138 bills have been vetoed by Governor Katie Hobbs. It's not quite the record. I think the record's something like 143. She might get there. And I don't mean to be, facetious, but as I said, my job as in the Democratic caucus is to make the arguments on the floor of the Senate that will kill these bills, and hopefully to bring some Republicans along the way and say, wait, what are the unintended consequences of this bill? But we saw dozens and dozens of voter suppression bills, of bills making it harder for you to vote, not easier, harder, and making it really more difficult for those in Native American communities to vote as well. We saw bills that you're probably going to see as a referral. You're probably going to see it on your ballot in 28, a bill that will restrict you from dropping off your ballot. You won't be able to drop it off after Friday. If you do, you'll have to wait in line, and the whole point of having a ballot and dropping it off is to make it easy and convenient. So we've seen so many bad bills. We've seen so many discrimination bills towards trans people, towards LGBTQ+, bills that will protect the rights of gun owners to bring their guns into the classroom and on campus. I mean, I could go on and on. So even though these are all sort of ugly bills, I call it a good because we have this tremendous champion. The silencer bill, yeah, we should be able to have silencers be legal. And it's sad to say, but a silencer, or not having a silencer, can be a warning sign. People can maybe escape, know where the shooting's happening, and that can be a helpful thing when there's a mass shooting. But they wanted to enable people to have silencers on their weapons of mass destruction. Unbelievable. So here we have more continuing the bad. We did some of the good. Let's talk about the bad. One of them is this bill 2679. I'll talk about later. Whoops. Okay, I have to go back. I missorted these slides. So now these bills probably aren't going anywhere. They're money bills. They're in this hopper, and we're heading right now into our session where we talk about the budget. We negotiate the budget. I just want to bring attention to them because on the face they're absurd, and you're sitting there on the Senate floor, and you have to make arguments. Or you should be making arguments, explaining your vote, and there's times you can't even believe what you're advocating against. Let's talk about the gold and silver bullion repository. So how many of you own gold bullion or silver bullion? Oh, okay. Well, the state wants to open up a repository free of charge, so anybody with gold or silver bullion can deposit it keep it there safe for free. They also want a tax exemption for private jet owners when they want to upgrade their jets or repair their jets. There already is a tax exemption if you buy a private plane. So this is to further that tax exemption, so you can upgrade your Cessna, and the taxpayers will have to feel the bite because of it. And this is one of my favorite ones: the $10 million a year to the private racehorse industry, supplementing purses because they want to build up the racehorse industry in Arizona. And so Dem said nay to that one and to others. And this image is kind of dark, but I hold to AI, like, put a horse in a plane with gold bullion. And so this is what it came up with. Now I have to say, like, make it lighter and easier to see in a PowerPoint presentation. There we go. So here's another really bad bill, and sadly it was passed. It was passed in both houses of the legislature, and then the governor ultimately signed it. It's HB 2679. And I want to say that the Senate, all the Democrats held the line. We all voted against it. I was really proud of that. But this bill, as you see from Sandy Barr's statement, I mean, Sandy doesn't usually go ballistic like this, but she has. Sandy Barr, who heads up the Grand Canyon chapter of the Sierra Club. This is a bill that will really help the utilities, will put unbypassable charges on your bills. And this is their press release that they put out the other day. She was denouncing Katie Hobbs. And some of you might say, wait, you might support support Katie Hobbs. Why are we talking about this? Why are we giving a negative about it? We have to hold people accountable. You have to hold politicians, everyone accountable for their actions. And this bill had such strong opposition from every environmental group, from Southwest Center for Energy Efficiency, for the Arizona ARISEA, the Arizona solar industry, from what's it called, the Retirees Association, from AAA, like everyone. You would not believe the level of opposition to this bill. And it will really benefit the major utilities, especially APS, especially the largest monopoly electric utilities. And what it will allow you to do, allow the utilities to bond for debt in coal plants. So there's a tool called securitization, and this is often called the securitization bill. And this is the most nerdy I'll get today in the discussion. But securitization is a way of bonding for debt for old assets. So one way it's used across the country is to retire a coal plant. And then you could replace it with renewable energy and also fund just transition for the coal shuttered communities that need to be funded to get jobs and have workforce development and all because you are shuttering the coal. So securitization is a good tool. It's used all across the country. Not in this case, 2679. It actually will prohibit renewable energy replacement. It'll tell you have to replace with gas if you do, but it will keep those coal plants open. So the Four Corners plant, which is supposed to be closed in 2031, and APS has said they will close it, they plan to sell it. They're going to sell it, and so it will continue running. So we'll have continue to have fossil fuel plants, coal plants, spewing polluted air, using up our water, using up our resources, and we won't have any funds to help those in coal shuttered communities who really do need the help because we are shuttering other coal plants. So it allows utilities to refinance hundreds of millions of dollars at lower interest rates, and it has zero requirements for any savings. So that could be really significant and be passed on in charges to every bill, every APS bill, and you won't be able to dispute it. And that's why there's been such an outcry about this. And this is a quote from Will Humble, who heads up the Arizona Public Health Association. He said, non-bypassable, those charges, means there's a mandatory fee added to all utility customer bills, which can't be avoided even if they generate their own power, like rooftop solar, or reduce energy usage via energy efficiency measures. Anyway, okay, so I've done the bad. Let's talk about some of the really ugly. And you can't talk about the Arizona legislature without talking about poison pills. Because often, and I learned this from serving in just this limited time, you'll see a proposal that seems good on the face of it, but then you realize when you read more closely, you see sometimes unintended consequences, sometimes intended consequences, that really there's a poison pill in there and you have to be really wary of. And I know Cathy and Melinda will talk probably a little more about this, but have you all heard of Prop 123 that was passed? How many years ago was it? 10 years ago, and it's running out on June 30th. And so through Prop 123, when there are land sales made, there's a certain percentage, I think 6.5% that goes, something like that, that goes to education, and it's going to expire, and we need that. We need that money. Otherwise, it's going to revert to something like 3.5%, and we'll be losing $359 million a year for our school system. So we need to renew it, and we've known this for a time, and we should have renewed it and referred it to the ballot in February. That was the deadline for getting it, say, on a May ballot, but we haven't. We pushed it off, we pushed it off, we pushed it off. So a few weeks ago, the Republicans came up with a plan. We still haven't seen it. No one's seen this actual plan, but they want to refer that to the ballot, right? But they also want to add a poison pill, and the poison pill is they want to enshrine in the Arizona Constitution the expanded private voucher system for schools, for private schools. Yeah. And we know Ducey's he's the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He's all over the country talking about the private school vouchers and how wonderful they've been. And they want to enshrine this. One reason is obviously so Democrats won't be able to repeal it in the future when we gain a majority maybe, but also they don't want to have any checks and balances, any accountability. Because under the Voter Protection Act in Arizona, if you enshrine something in the Constitution, you can't change it. You can only enhance it. So you couldn't make it more accountable. You couldn't say no Lego. You can't say no pianos, $5,000 pianos. You couldn't say, no, you can't use all that money for your kids' university education and tuition. We couldn't do that at all. We can only expand it and make it bigger and bigger. And by the way, the ESA voucher expansion takes $1.1 billion out of our budget every year. And there's special needs students who need to have these vouchers, but the biggest share of this $1.1 billion are people who are already in private school, never been in public school, and they're getting these, up $7,000 and more vouchers. So combining these two, and by the way, ESA vouchers, 2-to-1, we were against private school vouchers 2-to-1 in previous elections and previous ballot initiatives. And so it's very unpopular, and Prop 123 is popular because it will involve teacher raises. So it's a poison pill. We're fighting it. We don't know what the language is going to be like. We're thinking we're going to see that even maybe this week because the House comes back in session on the 19th. But we're very wary of it because it could be just a really ugly bill that we'll have to defeat. Okay, another ugly bill that is coming up, and it may not be an ugly bill because we might not even vote on it. It might just be part of the budget discussions, budget negotiations. Now, at the beginning of the session, we found out we had a $770 million expected surplus for one-time spending. So some programs we could fill in and some one-time spending projects we could fulfill and fund. That's been winnowed down, and last we heard 2 weeks ago was like 270 million. Now we're hearing it's in the tens of millions, maybe just 10 million, 80 million. It's very low. We don't really have much room to add anything to the budget. It's a Spartan budget. So we have this bill, HB 2704. The Diamondbacks owner would like us to fund $1.2 billion for the team for renovations of the stadium and maintenance forever and a day. Now, to give you some background, when they bought the team, it was $238 million, and now it's worth $1.6 billion. They don't pay property tax on the stadium. They don't pay any property tax. They don't pay any rent. They're supposed to pay $2 million a year that goes into a maintenance fund, but there's been very little public accounting where that money's gone. And they get all the revenue, not just from the baseball, obviously, but they get from any event that happens at the stadium, they get all that revenue as well. They do need to have some repairs, apparently, the roof and air conditioning and such. But there's a lot of us that think that we shouldn't be socializing the investment and privatizing the profits. So they've come in, and the situation has gotten worse over the past month, I would say. At first, they were listening to Democrats and people saying, hey, we want to be able to vote for this kind of, sort of, but you can't take so much money from the public treasury, especially in this austerity budget. So they're starting to listen and say, okay, well, we demanded take off luxury goods. Like, you know how in stadiums they have clubs within clubs and all the luxury seating, and they said, okay, we won't allow public money to be spent on that. Now they're back saying, no, we want public money to pay for all those clubs within clubs because the public has access to that club. They can pay, $1,000 in order to buy a ticket for $500. The public does have access, so they want public money used for all the luxury items. They also want maintenance forever, for 30 years, to be paid for by taxpayers. And they also want $20 million a year from the state treasury, and then they want $4 million from the city of Phoenix budget, and then they want to take money from the road tax budget in the county. And that means if you live in Phoenix, you are 3 times screwed. I'm sorry to use such gross language, but seriously, you'll be impacted at your state and your city and your county budget. And I've made this sort of a study of my life as an academic and also as an activist in Tempe because I helped to lead the opposition to the Coyotes Arena in Tempe. And and thank you. And academic study after academic study, I mean, for 70 years has shown that public investments in stadiums arena never pay off for the taxpayers. It just simply moves entertainment dollars from one place to the next. And if you're moving it to a place that does not, where the taxes are encumbered and taken away, then you're taking away from your public treasury. And so you'll even hear people from the governor's office say, well, we don't want the Diamondbacks to leave. We don't want that to be, we don't want to be at fault for driving them out of town. Well, this is out of the playbook. Every sports team owner says this. They say we might, be forced to leave. We're going to pick up our bat and balls and leave. And in the recent discussion, one of the representatives of the Diamondbacks said, if you don't make this deal, we might take spring training out of the area, which is, think about all the investment in infrastructure. They're going to go to some other state. No, they're not. There's been so much investment made, and it's a ridiculous threat. But it shows you the level of bullying that's happening, I would say, in this deal. So I want to say I'm very proud that Senate Democrats are holding strong. We have a list of demands, and thank you. And there may be some Democrats that vote for this, and they can. Maybe they can. They obviously need our votes, so we're being as strong and as steadfast as we can. I personally cannot vote for it myself, but doesn't mean I'm not going to give a list of demands and try and get things better for the taxpayers. But to me, it's a textbook example of a billionaire owner who has a $100 million baseball card collection, by the way, trying to push his way into the state treasury at a time where we're in desperate straits. So, yeah.
On this one specifically, the last time I heard, it doesn't even
Sorry, people can't hear you.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so the last time I heard this doesn't even make them stay for a certain amount of time if we pass this bill, which is ridiculous. We're going to do all this investment, and then they can still just get up and move and walk away.
Well, and that's one of the things we're insisting, that you'd have to stay. And they say, oh, if we leave, then we'll give $10 million. Like, that's nothing when you've gotten 500 from us, because that's what they say they need. But actually, it's 750 million they're wanting. And we're saying you have to have a one-to-one match. You guys have to put up money, the same as we put up money. Right now, it's a 3-to-1 match of public dollars versus their dollars. So there's so many bad things about it. I'm hopeful that we can at least get the deal better, but it may not be a vote on the floor. It may be just pushed into the budget. So that's, yeah.
Okay, I'll come. Are we ready for questions and answers now?
Yeah, I'm almost done.
Okay.
But still, it's good to have them as we go.
Hi, I was just curious, what's the basis for Republican opposition to that? Is it primarily fiscal, like, okay, it's irresponsible, or is there? Well,
I have to say, when I worked on the Coyotes referenda, I worked with Republicans. Republicans don't like to see tax dollars used like in this way. And it's interesting because Kendrick family, who owned the team, they gave $250,000 to the judge retention to retain Judge Bullock. And he used to be head of the Goldwater Institute. Usually they speak out against stuff like this, but they're being quiet. But I think the Freedom Caucus in the Senate and the Freedom Caucus in the House, I think they see it as fiscally irresponsible, so good for them. We'll grab votes wherever we can. And I think that if you look all over the country, that there's just a turning away from public investment for stadiums. And we know these sports team owners, it's going to increase the value of their team, and we're not going to get any of the revenue. So shouldn't we have some revenue come back to us? And what about a loan? And you have to pay us all back with interest. There's ways we can go about funding it. And there are sports teams owners in the country that are actually doing it the right way, billionaire owners who are more responsible. Yeah?
My question is, why don't we just kick them out and create our own team and make it a state team, and then all the revenue goes to the stadium?
Yeah. Hear, hear. So watch that as it transpires. It's going to be fascinating, I think. It's a case study in all of the different playbook machinations of a billionaire team owner. And I would suggest going to fieldofschemes.com. It's written by Neil DeMouse. He's an author who wrote the book Field of Schemes, and he comments on the Diamondbacks deal all the time in a very humorous way, as well as all the other stadium arena deals. And you can do a search and just look at the Diamondback stuff, but he is a wonderful journalist. So now we're heading into budget negotiations. It's it's going to be an austerity budget. We're very worried, but I know the Democratic priorities follow what Lucha Living United for Change suggests as the priorities, but we want no cuts to K-12 education, state Medicaid, and social safety net programs. No tax cuts, credits, or subsidies that further decrease revenue for public services, and zero in new spending towards immigration enforcement. There's already millions of dollars in immigration enforcement, and they have their guy there, the federal government. If he's going to spend more money, let him spend more money, but we shouldn't be taking it out of our treasury and using state funds for a federal responsibility. But we want to be responsible. There's some money that we're spending to help with technology and all the rest. We also must bolster the Housing Trust Fund to build more housing projects that have that middle income housing and workforce housing and affordable, but we also need to add spending for rental assistance because people are in dire straits, and it's obviously better to prevent them from being evicted than have to try and find housing for them after they are evicted. And that's the end of my formal presentation. I'd love to take any questions you have, and then I'll introduce our wonderful guests. Maybe just like 2 questions, and let me introduce these guys.
Okay, this is just a quick one. Lauren, there's so much that you need to know at a technical level to deal with these bills. How do you get informed? Do you depend on lobbyists for like Sierra Club or groups you trust?
Yeah.
Do you depend on each other? Do you kind of assign roles? Lauren's going to handle this, so-and-so, Sam's going to handle that?
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of confidence in your technical data?
Yeah,
just
great question.
That background would
Sure.
be helpful.
So we have a Senate minority leader is Priya Sundaresan from Tucson. She's an amazing energy attorney and now obviously a full-time legislator. So we have staff, and I am on 3 committees. One is Judiciary/Elections. It's a huge committee, and that's led by Wendy Rogers, if you know her. And then Government, led by Jake Hoffman, and I'm the ranking member, so I'm the Democrat on Government that leads the Democrats on that committee. And then I'm on Appropriations, which was quite a plum for a freshman, but I didn't get on the Natural Resources Committee, and I think they felt really bad, so they gave me Appropriations. So we have amazing staff. So each committee has a staff person, a full-time Democratic staff person, plus an intern from ASU, and the intern this year, the interns are incredibly, I didn't even realize they were interns the first week. I mean, their knowledge was just astounding considering they're undergraduate students. And so they do a lot of research for us as well. So they do a lot of research in every bill. So in committee, we know what questions to ask and references to how we can learn more. And then as the bill goes through committee and on the floor and on the other side, like the House bills come through, we learn more. We hear from advocacy groups, like there's allies I completely rely on, especially for judiciary and elections, the ACLU, the Voting Rights Coalition, Black Lives Matter, and Black Voices, Black Votes is incredible on election issues. So there's a lot of allies who we get information from. And then and some of those are lobbyists, some aren't. But then we have huge, lobbyists descend on the Capitol like you wouldn't believe. There's more utility lobbyists in the state of Arizona than there are legislators. And we had this whole Axon bill. I won't go into the details of that, but they were just teeming. The place was teeming. They hired every lobbyist around to represent them, and it was gross, honestly. And the grossest thing I encountered about lobbyists was Hell Week, as you know. You guys know what Hell Week is? So it's a week before the legislature starts, and once the legislature starts, lobbyists can't give you donations. And I don't take money from lobbyists, but they a lot of people do. I try not to judge, try not to be too judgy, but they have this event, this Hell Week fundraiser, and there's baskets for each legislator. And the lobbyists go through and they put checks in. I thought that was so gross. Disturbing to say the least. So, I mean, the influence of the lobbyists is intense, and you quickly learn who to trust, who not to trust. And often, if I'm really interested in a bill, I'm going to meet with all sorts of people, all sides or all perspectives. But sometimes it's almost not worth it meeting with them. Like, I don't need to meet with Philip Morris about their bill, But there's some lobbyists who are oppositional to how I feel. I want to learn more. So, and the best lobbyists, of course, are the ones that will give you the best argument of the opposition. And I always say that. So what's the reason, against this bill? And if somebody says, oh, there isn't a reason, it's like, I won't meet with them again because they're not being truthful. Did I answer your question? But then, I should say, so the standing member, the ranking member, I feel, is responsible for making those arguments on the floor, obviously, during COW, the second read, and then third read. But also, I will make up little speeches for different bills because I want to have everybody speak on certain bills. And that's very effective. Some people like that. Some people have done their own research. But I feel like it's my job to make sure that I'm whipping those arguments. And it's also really important we set up questions and answers of one another, because typically we'll ask the Republican sponsor, will you take questions about your bill? And they say, no, I won't. And Senator Miranda went through every single senator, say, will you take a question about the immigration bill? Nobody would take a question. And then she turned around and said, oh, Senator Epstein, will you take questions? And it's like, yes. And so we asked all those questions. And you'd be amazed. I mean, you think about all the comments that are made at the Senate floor, I'd say 85% are made by Democrats. Republicans don't explain their bills. They just vote lockstep. And Democrats, sometimes we fall in love. We don't fall in line, right? So there's times that I wish we were more falling in line on some votes. But it's a wily process.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you so much for coming to our organization. I have a question. I am a teacher. I have been a teacher for 20 years. And the last 3 years, thank you.
Yeah.
The last few years, what I saw among charter schools, how they get away with anything. They purposely pushing teachers away so they can hire and qualify sometimes high school graduate to teach the class to just save some money. And there is no accountability. They can do whatever they want. And the expansion is just, I don't know how to name it, but it's just craziness to allow those institutions to take tax dollar and have those children going through that, going through high schooler who never cares about teaching, just watch them. Like basically we're warehousing the kids and they are taking the money and no accountability whatsoever.
Well, I would just say there's more accountability with charter schools than private schools, and there certainly needs to be more accountability for charter schools. But you think about the ESA vouchers and how little accountability we have. It's unbelievable to me. And the Republicans will tell you it's a sacred cow. They won't even allow any accountability measures. So I hear you, and I feel like we're in more of a crisis mode, though, focused on the private schools. But you're right. Every step along the way, when we look at education reform, we always say, wait, you're just applying this to public schools and adding these burdens? Well, first of all, no, we're not going to support this. But if you're going to do this, you should do it in a way that applies equally to all the schools. And they don't often want to do that. And I know Melinda could speak much more eloquently to this topic as one of the co-founders of Save Our Schools. But, did you have one more question? Then we'll. Oh, COW, right. So you have first reads, essentially second reads and third reads. The third read is when you actually vote on a bill. And the first read is when one of the interns reads it out incredibly fast, like a carnival barker, and it's just assigned to a certain committee, and we're not voting or anything. And then COW is when it comes for a second read, and that's when amendments happen, and you make arguments on the floor, but you're not voting except on the amendments. But there have been particularly heinous bills this year, especially related to discrimination and immigration, where we have made a big ruckus and done a lot of strategery on the floor because we want to bring attention to the terrible nature of a particular bill. And then we've called for a division and we've slowed the process down. There's one day we just decided we're going to vote no on everything. And they started to realize, like, oh, something's happening here. It's because they weren't listening to a bill that a Democrat had gotten through the House chamber. So there's a lot that goes on there, but basically COW is the second read, and third read is when you actually have the vote. Yes, I should have said that. But I don't want to. Committee of the whole, COW. Not Not to be confused with the sacred cow, the ESA voucher. That's different. But I don't want to gobble up all the time. I wanted to introduce you to two women I greatly respect and admire, and they are Cathy Sigmon and Melinda Iyer, and they are the co-founders of Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. Have you all heard of? Yeah. And I'll let them tell you about their organization, and they're going to give their kind of brief rundown of the legislature and all that's happened, and tell you what's coming up. And I know you're going to talk about this, but there's Sunday happy hours, virtual happy hours. Whoops. There's Sunday happy hours at 4 o'clock. You'll get 400 people attending from all over the state. It's really engaging and inspiring, and I learn more about what's going on in the legislature from hearing their presentations than I do being in the legislature, because sometimes the information is closed off to you as a Democrat. Anyway, here you go.
Hi, everybody. So is this on? Can you all hear me? Oh. No?
Get as close as you can.
Ice cream cone. Yeah. Okay, now can you hear me? No? I don't want to leave anybody out. Okay, now can you hear me?
Sorry about the hair.
Okay, there we go. Oh, feedback
Okay.
time. Yeah, go over there, Cathy.
Yeah.
Scram. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Melinda. I am one of the co-founders of Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit group, and we formed to help Arizonans track state and local politics and make your voices heard. So for those of you out there who are like, how do you stay on top of all of this? Like, please come follow us. We would love to help you stay abreast of all the important happenings. You can find us on social media, what used to be Twitter, Blue Sky, we love. And we have an email list. We have a website, cebv.us. We put out weekly calls to action, a weekly email, which Cathy researches and writes, which will keep you up to date on all of the news happenings of the week. But we formed around this program at the state legislature called Request to Speak. And Arizona is the only state to have it. We do not have to speak, as the name implies. It allows you to sit on your couch and give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to various bills. And so we put out a weekly report that lists the bills that are moving and gives you clear calls to action organized by time. If you have 5 minutes, do this. If you have 15 minutes, do this. If you have a half an hour, do this. So we are here to help you. And I should also disclose that I am a registered lobbyist. Not all lobbyists are horrible. I decided that I wanted to follow the rules, and because I am advocating for and against legislation on behalf of an organization, I registered as what's called a citizen lobbyist, and I am proud to say that I've never given $1 of money to any of these, sorry, but that's just not what I'm about. So that said,
Yeah.
I want to expand on some of the things that Senator, is it Kuby or Kuby? Kuby. I want to expand on some of the things that Senator Kuby mentioned. I want to talk a little bit more about this issue of stadium subsidies or stadium giveaways. Senator Kuby mentioned the plethora of studies that show that we're just basically shuffling the economic deck chairs. Like, if you don't go to a baseball game, you're going to go out to a movie, you're going to go out to dinner with friends, you're going to go, do something else. And so there's not really this need for massive taxpayer subsidy when you're stripping revenue from one area, where there's, large corporate profit for a private franchise, moving it over there from something that could fund the public good, roads, transportation, public schools, things like that, things that are becoming desperately starved of resources here in Arizona and for which we need the money. Help direct me because I'm just rambling.
I was just going to talk about a couple of structural issues in the in the state budget, and we are focused a lot on the budget right now because that is truly the legislature's only constitutional duty, is to pass a budget. Our fiscal year ends the end of June, and if we don't have a budget by July 1st, there are consequences. But there are a couple of structural issues that have created a revenue situation that is essentially a Hunger Games among all of the different departments and state needs. And that is because there's a hard sort of lid on the ability of the state to raise taxes. Now, we all love to get tax cuts, and voters consistently vote for tax cuts. However, the flip side of that is that tax cuts also reduce revenue, and it's revenue that pays for schools, libraries, transportation, broadband, all the investment, healthcare, access, all the investments that we make in the state and in ourselves. So it has become a really poisonous situation over the past several decades because the state has been run by conservative Republicans, and they are consistently finding ways to reduce revenue, and they have made it structurally virtually impossible to raise revenue. And it is hard to understand how we will service our state's needs and our needs to invest in the future, in future development, in future businesses, in future, us, in kids, in schools, without actually raising revenue. And our state revenue is going down, not up, because of the 2.5% flat tax that was passed a few years ago. And the other structural issue, or just sort of to wrap that one up, we, the public, voted for an initiative, and I think it was back in the 90s, that in order to raise taxes, it requires a 2/3 vote of the legislature.
This happened in 1980, so for those of you who were around back then, if you
Reagan,
remember
Reaganomics.
the Reaganomics, the sort of sweeping across the country of, a fiscal accountability. This is a holdover from those days, and the Voter Protection Act requires that the state lawmakers have a 2/3 supermajority in each chamber in order to raise revenues, although it only takes a simple majority to cut revenues. And so what we end up having is this systematic choking of state finances.
Right. So thank you, Melinda. That actually said it more elegantly than I did. Now, the other structural issue is sort of the default position of conservative Republicans is to reduce revenue still more. I'm sure you've heard the saying, I want to reduce government to the size you can drown it in the bathtub, Grover Norquist. And so that has been the objective for decades. And the state has achieved this by tax carve-outs, not only tax cuts, but tax breaks. And of course, the Diamondbacks' $1 billion or whatever it amounts to be tax break is another way to sort of reduce revenue. Now, whenever you give a tax carve-out, it's actually called a tax expenditure because it is absolutely equivalent to when you're not bringing in revenue that's due. It's the exact same as if you brought in that revenue and spent it on something, on a special interest, which is what they all are. And the point that I want to make is that when Melinda and I were starting this work in 2016, the tax carve-outs in Arizona totaled $12 billion versus a state budget of $17 billion.
That's with a B, just to be clear.
Yeah, B billion. Today, tax carve-outs are almost $30 billion, and and our budget has been reduced to 16 or so billion dollars by decreasing, again, putting sort of the manhole cover on that state revenue. So those are structural issues. We are refusing to collect revenue that we could use to actually fund what the state needs.
And then the revenue that we are collecting, Senator Kuby alluded to our $1 billion per year ESA voucher boondoggle, which studies show that the vast majority of these vouchers are going to benefit students in wealthy areas who were already attending private school. So it is a direct subsidy for the wealthy. And again, that's costing us $1 billion every year. And Republicans have systematically refused to put even the most basic guardrails on this program. And that's, you know, that's where we are.
Yeah. So because we're in budget time, that's why I think we're focusing a lot on the revenue issues. But we have sort of been backed into a corner in terms of what we can do.
And the first rule, of course, is when you're in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah. Well, they will not stop digging. So
the bar is now in hell.
Yeah, no, I absolutely commend Senator Kuby for standing up to run, for taking on all these challenges. It is a very, very, very hard job. And, you know, I thank you for representing our interests so beautifully down there. So, yeah. So.
We now have questions.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Aaron, Vice President here at HSGP. Thanks for joining us. So one of the questions I have is pertaining to like sort of what seems to me to be like a larger issue. Like, doesn't it seem like some of these battles that we seem to be facing and the challenges we're talking about here in Arizona and of course nationwide is sort of like this 30 to 40 year project like of folks to demonize the word government, right? To make government look bad and therefore, right, we need to get rid of it. When in reality, it's sort of like, it feels like it's sort of like chopping the tree off of the branch you're sitting on because very, very much so we rely upon these big things that sometimes we just take for granted. So my question is, doesn't it seem to be the case like that we really need to like work to counter that narrative and create a narrative that says, no, like this is for everyone and it's just beneath your feet?
That's a great question, Aaron. Thank you. One of the central tenets of civic engagement beyond voting as an organization is that government is us. Government exists as a system of mutual benefit and helping our society's most vulnerable, because someday that might be you. And it is a collective decision to make sure that we're all taken care of. And if you've ever been to a school board meeting or a city council meeting of a small town, you have seen this principle directly in action. I want to talk a little bit, I'm going to hijack your question just slightly, and talk about, Senator Kuby mentioned the fight over the funding for the Division of Developmental Disabilities. So this is a program that the Parents as Paid Caregivers program, which is part of DDD, trains parents to take care of their children with extraordinary special needs. So we're talking, you know, a teenager with a feeding tube in a wheelchair who perhaps has 10 to 30 seizures every day. These are extraordinary special needs. And during COVID, it became very clear that the caregiver population just was not present to go into people's homes and take care of these children. So the federal government created a program to train parents to provide these services and to receive reimbursement, which allows them to be productive members of society and keeps families together at a far lower cost than we would spend, for example, on institutionalization. So ripping these children from their families and putting them in institutions would cost the state far more money and is also not the moral thing to do, right? So this fight that Senator Kuby alluded to of $122 million in funding, that is only to get us to the end of the fiscal year, which, as Cathy mentioned, is June 30th. So that was just the next couple months of funding, and then the fight starts all over again for the fiscal year to follow, which is what they're negotiating right now in the state budget. And there are Republicans who do not want to see this program continued at all. They say, well, these parents used to do this for free, so let them go back to doing it for free. Now, and that would result in a lot of cases in institutionalization. And I watched the committee testimony, and I have spoken to some of these families and listened to them talk about, you know, mothers who have considered suicide because they don't see any other way out of the situation that they're in, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So that's the sort of thing that we're facing. And when they say that we don't have the revenue to continue funding this program, what is government for, right? What else is it for?
Well, apparently it's for baseball stadiums and
we have some feelings on these issues in case you haven't noticed.
and wealthy people getting a $7,000 discount to go to private school.
I have an op-ed which is going to be coming out hopefully Monday in the Arizona Mirror about the stadium giveaway concept in general. And I think this idea of what Senator Kuby mentioned of, you know, oh no's, like if we don't give them, you know, if we don't empty our pockets, you know, turn out our pockets and give them all our money, they're gonna leave. Like the Major League Baseball is constructed specifically with fewer teams than markets. So there's always this pressure of, you know, going around to sort of float and find, you know, the best deal for their pockets. And I think that the answer lies in just a collective banding together of saying, no, you know, we're not gonna do this. Like cities need to stand up and say our public dollars are for the public good. But that has to come from a groundswell of public pressure. So this is something I encourage you to talk about within your communities.
Yeah, and I mean, that also gets to the heart of what CBV is all about, which is engaging people with state and local government, but also realizing your individual power, your agency to speak up as a voter, as a resident of Arizona, as somebody who cares about, you know, what, as you rightly said, what government is for. It's for the public good. And government is truly to do things that we cannot individually do for ourselves. And that may be paving roads. I mean, imagine if you were responsible for the road right in front of your house.
All right, I have to hijack that.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard, there's a book called A Man Walked Into a Bear. And I highly suggest that you all look this up. There was a town in New Hampshire that was founded by libertarians, and they decided that they weren't going to do taxes, they weren't going to fund any of these things like, for example, trash collection. And at about 3 months into their experiment, the bears moved in because of all the garbage and took over their town, and they had to abandon it. So that's an example of what government does for us.
Mm-hmm. So use your voices. That's what we're getting to. Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for thank you for creating civic engagement and for what you're doing. My question is on speaking up. Exactly that. Does it make a difference if we were to go down to the state legislature when the committee hearings are being held to speak in favor or against bills in person? And can you tell us a little bit how that works? How much time are you given? Do you always get a chance? If you say, I want to speak, will you be allowed to speak? And does it make any impact? Really, would it be helpful for us if we feel that strongly for us to go in person to speak?
So I can take this one. It is really all about who's driving and running the process down there. Because Republicans have a majority, they control every aspect of the process, from who is Speaker of the House or Senate President, and then that person assigns the committee chairs, and they set membership. So all the committees have a Democratic minority and a Republican majority. The committee chair in that little hearing room is akin to God, unfortunately, and has supreme power to decide who speaks and for how long. So, I have seen instances, and I have personally been in situations where there are 50 people in a room who want to speak against a bill, and 2 lobbyists in a room who want to speak for the bill. And the committee chair will say, well, we're going to have 2 on a side, as if every public individual who showed up to testify on that bill is somehow aligned, and has coordinated with each other beforehand. We're going to have 2 on a side, and each of you gets 2 minutes to speak. So it can be very frustrating. That's one reason why we use the request to speak system, and there are public comments that you can type in. You get 250 characters, and believe me, you can say a lot in 250 characters, and it is public record, so we recommend not saying anything you wouldn't say to your grandmother or put in print, though it's tempting to be snarky. Also making phone calls. And, requesting a meeting with your state lawmaker is incredibly impactful. There's a hierarchy, right? For every 1,000 people that, learn about a bill and complain, 100 might use the request to speak system, 50 might make a phone call, 10 might show up to testify, and 1 might try to make a meeting with their lawmaker. And as you get higher up in that pyramid, your actions become increasingly impactful. So there are things that we recommend that you do if you follow our weekly calls to action, and it's always targeted on what's going to be the most impactful way for us to use our voices.
But I do want to add to that by saying, is it worth it? Yes, it's absolutely worth it. It's worth going to a committee meeting in person. It's worth signing up to speak. Is that the... Oh, okay, sorry. Even if you don't get a chance to speak, it is worth trying. And because your voice also could be amplified beyond that committee room. You can say, if I had not been stopped from speaking, this is what I would have said. And write that as a letter to your lawmaker, or write it, send it as an op-ed or a letter to the editor. And also, all of these actions are additive. So if you use RTS, if you sign up to speak, if you write a letter to the editor, if you call, 5 legislators, all of that adds up. But it does take a lot of persistence. So, yeah. Yeah.
What I like to do in my committees is when I know they're going to restrict who can speak and how long.
Come over here.
Right. When they try and restrict how long someone can speak and how many people speak, you as a committee member have the opportunity to ask questions, and they cannot stop you from doing that. And so I'll often just really either drag out the testimony, sounds negative, but ask someone questions to really get more of the points introduced. And sometimes that's planned in advance because we know what they're going to do, and so we make sure people are there who can answer certain questions. So it's it's like a kabuki theater dance that's happening. But generally, you're not going to come into committee. It's like, I convinced the Republicans to go against this bill. Like, they know how they're voting.
Although that has happened, and I have seen it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was, I think 4 years ago, we were offering testimony trainings, and we had a woman come in and take our testimony training, and then go down to speak against a bill, and impacted Senator Tyler Pace, who's no longer down there, but chose to vote against the bill based on the testimony that he had heard in committee. And that was an incredibly powerful moment for this particular advocate. But it isn't just, like Cathy said, it's absolutely worth going down there. That sort of moment definitely doesn't happen every day, but being in the room is incredibly impactful and informative. Which lawmakers are looking constituents in the eye, and which are playing with their phones underneath the dais. How are they relating to each other? Are they whispering to lobbyists in between votes? Are they leaving the room entirely? And then there are always journalists in the room who would be just thrilled to take your commentary.
Yeah.
First, thanks to all the speakers today. Great job. Thank you, all speakers. For a few decades, couple decades, Democratic candidates in Arizona, some
have done a great job of winning office, sometimes statewide office, and we've sent a lot of Congress people to D.C., but we've never been able to crack the state legislature. Is that due to gerrymandering, or is there something else going on? Thank you.
Well, gerrymandering is definitely a part of it. The state legislature, we have an independent redistricting commission, which redraws the lines every 10 years. This last, so it's set up as 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 independent. So really all the power hinges on this one independent and who they are and who they align with. And this past cycle, there were like little carve-outs, you know, like this for you know, a specific person that they wanted to be in a specific district. Like if you're a resident of Phoenix, like me, you watched the Central Phoenix district go from something that was very community-driven to something very tall and narrow. Like, I'm not sure what, you know, the Willow Historic District has to do with Sunny Slope, but they're now in the same district. And, you know, the former Legislative District 28 that I was a part of that came together just to systematically flip our legislators from Republican to Democratic over the course of 10 years was fractured into 3 separate districts. So there is some purposeful gerrymandering that's going on. That's not all of it. It's a very complex question.
Good morning. Hi.
Hi.
Good morning.
I guess I don't really have a question, more of a statement. First and foremost, I wanted to say thank you for doing what you do. You mentioned this morning vulnerable populations. All my life I have been a vulnerable population. I've been in that demographic. And now when I'm facing 60 and finally feeling like I'm waking up, I look at the current political climate and it feels very depressing, very much so. And I just wonder, to what you mentioned earlier, you said our individual power. I sometimes feel like I don't have power here because I feel like we're losing. I feel like the side of sanity is losing. And without being political, I feel like the other side, I feel like they are sociopathic narcissists, period. That's how I feel. And I feel like there are so many more of them than what we realize. And it's a feeling that I've always had, even before I knew how to put it into words. You feel like this, even though I don't have a religious belief, this evil exists. It's always been there. And you went back to Reagan. And it feels like a plan, like a systematic plan. And it's overwhelming. And I grew up as a person, I was raised in the projects. I always loved education, right? I went to school, and civics was American government was my favorite class, and I believe it or not, it sounds crazy now, but I believed in the government, and I believed in this country, and I find out that everything has always been against me. And now I feel like, do I have individual power? Because I want to, like, I'm planning to leave this country. Do I stay and fight? Or do we just leave? Because this is reprehensible what they are doing, right?
First of all, yes. Second of all, Cathy and I have an agreement. We both have our long, dark nights of the soul, but we have an agreement that neither of us is allowed to break down at the same time. And we we support each other. So the fact that you're here in this room means that you have a lot of potential political action buddies, and I would encourage you to lean on them for support. I had a lot that I wanted to say, and it's escaping me. I feel what you're saying so deeply.
I have something to add with regard to the previous comments. There's a fantastic book by Amanda Knief called The Citizen Lobbyist. It allows individuals and gives people not only encouragement, but tools that one individual can use to become a lobbyist of one and to be a self-advocate. So I highly recommend The Citizen Lobbyist by Amanda Knief.
But yes, we do have power. I always use the example of the Grand Canyon. Each of us is like a drop of water on a rock. Individually, we may not accomplish much, but together, it's water that carved the Grand Canyon. So there's power and strength and purpose in numbers.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today and sharing everything. You know, Senator Kuby, it seems like it has been a blessing that you did not get elected for the previous two, because your destiny was, you know, far greater than that. So thank you for continuing on that trajectory, and thank you for the work that, you know, I didn't even know civic engagement beyond voting is, you know, just that phrase is so powerful. So thank you for invoking and evoking and allowing us to participate in that. And thank you for your vulnerability. You know, the last comments that were just made around individual power. Thank you for your vulnerability and coming from your heart and, you know, literally putting your life into words and sharing with us. And to that, the individual power exists, and it is powerful beyond words. And I'm going to give you just my example in that I had never been to the Senate or to the House before these past few months. And I was there for the first time and for Arizona Space Association meeting, and ended up in the Senate Majority Caucus room. And that was my first time, you know, being with some of the bigger corporations and some of the Senate members and House representatives. And after that, I was there with several other different organizations. That kind of opened the door for me. And again, I was able to have conversations one-on-one, again, with either the corporations or the lawmakers, right? So these are people that have influence, that are in the room making decisions, and I was talking to them. And as a result of it, like I said, it led to a domino effect that I was there with maybe the Education Committee, maybe, you know, with even the Child Welfare Association. You know, they also had a group there. But to your point that you made, that I did have one-on-one meetings with the lawmakers as well. And without naming any names, I'm going to say in a bipartisan way, everybody understands what is going on, the narcissism that is at play. And even the other side understands and recognizes it, and they know that this is a short-term game, which is not going to come to fruition. So that was, it took me after the meeting to understand what he was saying, you know. To me, behind closed doors, the lawmaker was saying to me behind closed doors that we've got work ahead and all this nonsense that is going on. So that's where we have to be willing to stand together and understand our power. And as you said, as you mentioned the word evil, please know and understand our power as human beings. That's where I'm not going to hesitate and bring spirituality in. We are beyond powerful, but you have to be willing to invoke that power at this time. if you just, at the limitation of your human body, take steps, and that's not what I'm doing. I am invoking the power, and this is from Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. We are in a universe where none of this is empty space. This is a unified field. And I am tugging onto that field, and I connect with people without having any social media presence. I do not have any social media presence. But the connections that have been made just in these last 6 months have been so amazing, and I continue to make them. Strategic collaborations, whether it is with industries, whether it is with lawmakers, whether it is with decision makers in the community. So please, please, please do not underestimate your power, and my humble request to each one of you is to be willing to shine like the sun.
So, yes. And one of the things that I wanted to say before is we are now in a stage in this modern time that we find ourselves in where we are flipping over all of the rocks and exposing what was hiding underneath and watching the bugs crawl out. And this, they don't ever win. And it gets ugly, but I truly do believe that the arc of the universe bends towards justice, but we are the ones who have to bend it.
Yeah.
We have time for one final question.
I received your email last week, and you have listed a number of representatives that think it's okay to subsidize the D-backs. So I personally sent each one of them an email. It took me a little while to do that. And I encourage everybody to get on with these folks. I've been doing it since 2018. I was part of the Red Fred down there at the Capitol every daggone night. And folks, this is what it takes. You have to at least sign up with these folks and do your opinion on Sunday. A number of people in there I know have been doing it for a long time. We need more and more people doing that. They don't always like it. I was down at hearings and it'd be 500 to 10 with us winning, and the darn Republicans would vote for the 10 anyway. But they know what we're saying, and we got to be continually adamant at constantly being in their case and making them know that we are out here. And I very much appreciate you folks being here today. It was a surprise, and I'm super happy to meet you both.
Well, we really thank Senator Kuby for engaging us and asking us to be here. So thank you.
So one last thing, Senator Kuby has one last thing to go through here is a bit of information packet that she's encouraging all of us to pass out.
Yeah, information packets, if you come across someone that is in need of information who might be deported, whether this is a preventive measure or someone's in the act of it, this is information by the ACLU. There's packets of it. You can take a whole packet or just take one of them, but we'll leave them up here. And please consider that. It's really important to keep that in your car or in your purse in case you see someone who's being treated in a way they shouldn't be treated, which is happening more and more.
Yeah, there's a handout that we passed out. We didn't have nearly enough. So if it's one that you don't need to take, please pass it on to someone else. But our website is cebv.us. So you will find all of our resources there and ways that you can engage in our happy hour this afternoon. We're having the Western representative from Run for Something, so I'm super excited about her being there.
To be clear, those are on Zoom.
Yeah.
So please feel free to come.
Bring your own drink.
Okay, at that, please give a round of applause for Senator Kuby, Melinda, Cathy.
Will you humor me before you leave? I want to take a selfie with you all in it.